our project. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Welcome to our project and thank you for accepting our invitation. My name is Manuela, but you can call me Manu. This project is part of the Contemporary Literature in English course in the eighth semester of the Language and Literature program at Federal University of Mato Grosso do Sul. I'm here today with my colleagues. They're going to introduce yourselves later. And today, here with my colleagues, we're going to carry out this activity, which is part of an outreach project that aims to build a bridge of dialogue between university classes and living literature and its representatives in society. Now, let's move on to a few questions for you. I think Juliana, Bruna, and Julia are going to ask you some questions.
Hi, my name is Bruna, and Juliana will be making our first question.
Hi. My first question is, how did the desire to create online magazines arise?
Can we, I don't know if I think Clary was talking, but we can't hear you.
No, I was going to ask if you wanted to take that question first, or who you wanted to have take the question first.
Yeah, I had the same question. Do you have some order in mind, or no?
We didn't thought about like order.
Okay, so Claire, please go ahead.
Okay, so the question was, how did the desire to create an online publication come about? And I think, it's probably different for everyone. I know for Lana and I, we come from storytelling, and we had been working, and we received essentially a prompt or a brief asking, how do we get young people or people in general interested in the topic of regenerative agriculture and sort of a better future on this planet? And years ago, we had been working together at a media company called Vice, which was all about storytelling, both through the, primarily through the lens of journalism. And we kind of had this idea about speculative fiction, and what if there was a science fiction initiative that was telling positive futures. So years and years later, when we had this opportunity to think about what would a new editorial platform look like, we were like, oh, this might be the perfect moment to think about that sort of science fiction story platform. And I think the reason we were interested in online, specifically editorial, is one, because it does give us the opportunity to reach a lot of people, especially young people, to take stories that, might not otherwise be able to get traction and kind of put them out there in a way that is low left, where you can, try things, short stories, put them out in kind of quick ways. And I think for us, that's really exciting. And that's part of like what makes at least me really excited about online publishing, and the ability to use that as a way to get people thinking about the future in a new way through the lens of stories. Lana, I don't know if you have kind of something to add on that front as part of our origin story.
No, not really. Claire, you said everything I would have said. Endorse 100%.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing, because as Clary said, each magazine I think has an origin, and in my case, I'm talking about Mafagafo. That's the magazine that I had for a couple of years here in Brazil. But I'm also, I think I will talk also about Cascártica. That's the magazine that the educational project in a form of magazine that I have today. I'm going to talk about that with Diogo, my partner. But in the case of Mafagafo, I was a writer. I was like very used to read stories in the Anglophone short fiction world. So I used to read Clark's World, Uncanny, and a lot of magazines, science fiction and fantasy magazines. And I loved the format, like the short fiction market. And we had just, I think that when Mafagafo was created, I think we had basically one magazine here in Brazil, which was Trasgo, from created by Rodrigo, that a friend of mine. Not at the time, I befriended him later, but so I was like, okay, I like to write, I like to read short stories. We don't have anything like that here in Brazil. I would like to have it, a space for people to publish short stories. So I was like, why not? Later, I was like, okay, yes, there's a lot of work in a magazine, but at the same time, I don't know, I learned a lot with the process as an author, as an editor. I wasn't an editor at the time. I mean, I started to be an editor as soon as created the magazine, and it was amazing. So that was the idea. Let's have space for people who write in Portuguese to publish their short stories. So that was basically the origin of Mafagafo. And then later, years later, I don't know, 10 years later, I now have a project that's called Fantástico Guia, which is an educational project for authors and also people who work in the editorial market, so translators, editors, and other professionals. And we have like we say to people like, hey, let's write in English, let's publish. Actually, Tractor Bean probably received a lot of stories from our students because we always talk to them about the magazine, which is amazing. And but also we wanted to have a space here in Brazil, not only to publish more stories in Portuguese, but specifically to teach people how to have a magazine. Because this project, Fantástico Guia, is mine and also my partners, Diogo Ramos, who also had another magazine which was created like at the same time of Mafagafo, called it A Taverna. So we weren't partners at the time. We got together later, but then we decided to put together this 10 years of experience that we had with our own magazines, and we created Cascardica with the idea like to show people how it is in the background, how you do a magazine. So the magazine has like a time frame which is really relaxed because we don't want to hurry things. We buy these stories, we pay the guys, we show them all our colleagues in the magazine the contract, how you do a contract, how you contact the author. Then we edit the story together, we edit the story together, we make all the processes, and so it takes longer. But the idea is to have this. It's like a school, we want people to have the opportunity to work in a magazine while a real magazine is done, So actually, if you are interested, all the students, Elton, you are totally welcome to be part of our project. I can send you the link afterwards. And if you want to be inside a magazine, you are very, very invited. That's it.
That's nice. We want to know too, what is the process of creating an online magazine, like in terms of choosing the text, editing the magazine, the publication, the marketing, and like the aesthetic too. Like we want to know, how do you guys choose these? How do you guys make the process?
We can jump in for a tractor beam. Yeah, so I mean, I will say I think we would have really benefited from this sort of how to run a magazine class because for Claire and I, we had never done this before. It's something that we had been, I think, adjacent to in various jobs. We both were at Vice. We were very much around the publication of magazines, both physical and digital, but it was something we had never actually done on our own. So this was kind of a wonderful opportunity. And I don't think either of us really anticipated that we would be running a magazine when we started this process. So it has been a little bit of learning on the go. But to sort of answer your question about process, the way that we work. So Tractor Beam is a quarterly publication, which means that we're putting out new issues 4 times a year. We do it sort of aligned with the seasons. So we publish our issues on the solstices and the equinoxes. And so so that means 4 issues a year, which means we're calling out for submissions 4 times a year. We get submissions from all over the world. When we first started, we were, I think it was something like 25 or 30 submissions. And now, we're on issue 4. We got 400 submissions for our last issue. So that number has really exponentially increased. And I think for us, a big learning has been how to manage that. And, how do you sift through 400 stories? How do you decide what to choose? And, how do you categorize stories so that, something that was great but not good for that issue or that theme, you can come back to later. So there's a lot of logistics around kind of managing submissions that we could go into excruciating detail on if we wanted. But I think for the purposes of the conversation, I think, the way that we think about crafting an issue before we sort of plan out what the issues are going to be, usually around a year in advance. So we have everything through the next winter kind of basically scoped out. And of course, we always leave space for if, an amazing author comes along and says, I want to do a piece for you, or if we get submissions that are sort of leading us in a direction where, a lot of people are talking about this one thing, like maybe we can turn that into something bigger. Typically, we have a sort of benchmark theme. So, for example, our last issue, Something's Rotting, we were like, okay, it's the fall season. We want sort of decay. We want rot. We want mushrooms. We want compost. And so that was kind of the general prompt that we gave people. And when we're reading, we're really just looking for, our stories on theme, of course. Are they good stories? I think, a lot of times, especially in the science fiction genre, you can get into a trap where like it's not as much about the story, it's more about the technology or the like proposal of what this new world might be. And I think sometimes authors forget that story is ultimately about character. It's about, a beginning, middle, and end. It's like sort of the sort of basic tenets of writing that I think, just what makes a good story. So, yeah, I mean, we choose based on sort of quality of writing, quality of story, inventiveness of the proposal, of the ideas that are in the story, and then sort of tone. Some stories are more upbeat or quicker pace, and some stories are more slow and contemplative. And so, making sure that we have a balance. And typically we pick around 10 stories and graphic novellas for each issue. So yeah, going from 400 to 10 is honestly a really tricky process. We're actually in the middle of it now for our next issue, so we can get into that. I've already spoken for too long, but it's a really fun but challenging process. And Jen, I'm so curious, like what how is the approach, what you take.
Oh my God, I think we had very like lots of different approaches along the years, because we had like different formats, because we are learning as we went. So in the beginning, the first issue of Mafagafo, I'm going to talk about Mafagafo first, the older magazine. The first one was we didn't have like a slush pile, or we didn't receive material. We invited the author because we are like really starting off and we didn't know how to do anything. And in the beginning, Mafagafo was, I don't know how to explain that. It was like the stories, we had like 5 stories, I think, divided in 5 parts, and all the stories were published in different parts. So it was an idea like an episodic stories, so after that we realized it wasn't the best format, but we had another issue in parts. But at the time we opened the first submission process. Then we had, as you said, Lana, like 20 stories, and then okay, that's easy, let's do that. And then we started to change a little bit the process with each issue. So at each issue we do a different thing. We had 1 year, I think that was the most interesting for me format, in which we invited 12 editors from Brazil, big editors from big publishing houses, and also independent editors. We had, I don't know, 200 or something submissions, and each editor, everybody read everything, but each editor got to choose one story, and we publish one story per month. So the whole year, like one story. And the stories, I think that's what made like Mafagafo most known, because we had specific covers for each story, and they were like amazing covers, because we had Dante Luiz, maybe you know him because he's present in the Anglophone world. He was our art director, so he would like buy the covers from different artists. And then we had like 12 publications along the year. At this time, we had like crowdfunding, recurrent crowdfunding project going on. So we could pay the authors, like, and everybody, and the editors, the copy editors, the illustrators from the covers, a good amount of money. Like I was very proud at the time, because we could pay like sometimes more than a big publishing house would pay for the professionals. And then after that, like we had different formats. But today in Cascartica, that's the teaching scheme magazine, is a little bit different. We had a slush process, like a submission process in the past. We bought a couple of stories. We also bought like rights to translate big stories from English into Portuguese. So as an example, in our first issue now, that's going to be released in the first quarter of 2026, we had the story that won the Hugo Awards last year. That's from Naomi Kritzer. We talked to her, and she sold us the rights for translation. We also have like other invited stories, but we have also stories that came from the submission process. But right now we are just we closed the submission process because we already have 2 issues being produced, and we are thinking that the next time we're going to open submissions, but only for people who are already working with us inside Fantástico Guia, not the magazine, but our project as a whole. Because you probably know that, like, when you open submission process, people are like sometimes aggressive when you don't release the magazine as fast as they can. They start to send you emails and they start to complain, and we're like, okay, we don't want that, we don't need that.
Yeah, I believe that. Jana, actually, sorry, if I can ask a question of you, I'm curious to know how you manage your slush pile, because I think one of the things that Lana and I, as you know, we are mentioning in our process, we work with slush readers, we get a bunch of stories, hundreds from the last several rounds. So we have, I think, a bank of close to 1,000 stories. And we're trying to sort of figure out how we are able to, going forward, get really useful feedback from our initial rounds of readers. How do you like practically use your slush readers to evaluate stories, put the right ones at the top? Like, what do you look for in that process?
Yeah, that's also a process that changes with time. But like in the past, in Mafagafo, we had a team of editors, like 5 editors, who would do a first reading, then a second reading. So each story was read twice. And then we had 2 yes, this goes to one pile there. 1 yes and 1 no, a third people read this story. 2 no's, okay, this is off our pile. That's basically that. But today in Cascartica, that's the good thing of having like a a place where people are learning. We have several people there available to and willing to read. So we have like this month, who wants to be a first reader? So we have like 10 first readers. So we have like monthly meetings with them to kind of align what we are expecting. They are learning also to understand what we like to publish, what we consider, because they are very confused with that. Like, oh, but if I like a story, but what if I like a story, but it's not good? Or the opposite. What if a story is good, but I don't like it and it's like a personal thing? And we talk to them that it's inevitable. There is like a personal bias when you're choosing a story. We try to make them like read the stories that me and Diogo, that are the, like, let's say the final editors, we say, no, these stories are nice to us. And then after that, when they kind of select, they have a form, a Google form, and they can evaluate like the stories that we don't make notes, but we just make. If you like the story and you want us to read it, fill the form, telling us what you like in the story, also what you don't like in the story. We don't do that for the stories they don't want us to read, you know. So they just fill the form when they like a story and they want it to go ahead. And then we can see, oh, 5 people fill the form for this story. So we were like, okay, let's read the story, let's check out what is happening. And it has been working very well with us, because they don't need to fill the form for every story. So sometimes you start to read the story and you see that it's not what you want, it's not it doesn't fit your magazine, like editorial line. So they don't need to waste time filling the form saying, oh, I don't want this story because blah blah blah. They just need to fill the form when they want to send the story ahead. And so this is more or less what we are doing. We are, as I said, like me and Diogo, we read all the stories afterwards just to see if one story was like nobody talked about it, but we think and it never happened. So for us, it's like they are really aligned with what we are. It happened that like many people send a story forward and we didn't like it for many reasons, or we didn't think it fit the editorial process or whatever. But it never happened the opposite. So it never happened that a good story that we would like to buy was forgotten in the bio. I think that's more or less.
It's awesome to see the process, and I want to know that if you guys have any authors or artists who inspire you or that you look it up to in your magazines or work.
I have many many professionals that I look up to. So Neil Clark is an editor from Clarksworth. He was like the first people to editor from the Anglophone world to talk to me from Iquo to, we were in the same grounds. I talked to him in an event, and then after that we started to exchange emails about editing our own magazines. And it was very interesting because I was like, at the time I had submitted some stories to him. After that, I ended up like publishing 2 stories in Clarksworth, but he is like a professional that I really look up for as an editor. As an author, I have like many references. I don't want to start like listing of them here, but I mentioned Naomi Kritzer. She is like a writer that I really love. She's very the first I love the stories she writes, but I also love how she was very summarizing the story during pandemic. She had a story written in 2015 about a pandemic that people started to kind of talk again about this story because it was really similar to what was happening with COVID. So people were like, oh, she predicted COVID, etc. And the story was very beautiful, was very sad, but very beautiful. and it was about a nurse, etc. It has something to do with a nurse, and my sister is a nurse, and she was in the COVID, and working in hospitals during COVID. And I was like, oh, I wanted my sister to read this story, but she doesn't speak English. So I contacted Naomi Klitzer. We had no contact at all. And I said, like, look, I have a magazine. I don't have money because dollar exchange rate is like crazy. But I really wanted to have my sister to read this story. And I was thinking, can I translate this story and publish it in my magazine for free? My magazine is free for everybody. And other people also can read the story. And she was like, sure, go ahead. You don't need to pay me. I actually offered her a payment, I think. She was, no, just if you want, put a link for people to donate for a hospital there in Brazil, etc. And I published this story, and it was like really, oh my God. So she's very, very nice person also. So Naomi Klitzer would be a name also, an inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, we have a lot of authors that really inspire us, both from the perspective of just like incredible craftspeople, also, again, in the space of speculative fiction and science fiction, just folks that are really like basically out there thinking about like, what could the future look like? What does it look like if it's, a better space on this planet, a weirder one, a different one? I think for me, at a very foundational level, even outside of publishing Tractor Beam and getting to work on this project and kind of be steeped in this on a day-to-day level, I think that's really shaped just my outlook on the world from a very young age. So, folks like Margaret Atwood, just like that I read at a very formative time in my life, probably have been kind of like deep red threads that are coming out in Tractor Beam today. But I think from an editing and just kind of putting Tractor Beam out in the world perspective, one of the earliest conversations I had was actually with Tori, who runs Imagine 2200 at Grist, and that is their science fiction initiative. And I can't explain how helpful he was from so many different levels. First of all, just him being like so welcoming and so like, if you guys have this idea, you should just go out and do it. Which, as Lana mentioned, she and I both come from media, come from a magazine and publishing world and space, but we'd never done anything like this before. So kind of having someone else just kind of open the door and say, yeah, cool, that was really amazing. But also, he literally was so generous with his time and straight up sat down with me and was like, okay, get people's emails, get slush readers. I think I called him around the time when we had first gotten a pretty big influx of stories. And I think I was like, how do you read all these stories all at once? Which you'll see is probably an ongoing question that I keep having because it is so important to read all the work, or at least for me, and I think Lana as well, to feel like we are really spending time with each of the pieces. But, he sat down and he was like, here's how slush works. Here's how, you can build a roster. He also was really generous and was like, I'll open up my contact book. He has really great contacts across the sort of literary world, but also with authors. And he was like, if there's anyone you're interested in reaching out and commissioning, I'm willing to facilitate that relationship. So I think he's also really been an inspiration in terms of just not only the craft of the work, but also the community of the work. And I think that's been really great.
Yeah. A fun fact is that I was published in Imagine 2200 last season. Yes. And Tori was the editor of my story. So it was very fun to work with him as an author and an editor. And he's really amazing. I really like Imagine 2200 is so beautiful and so it's an amazing project. You should read the project.
Yeah, you guys definitely should. It's awesome. And yeah, they've been putting out great work for the past 5 years. And I think we're really lucky to be able to sort of be in their space.
Okay. Have a seat.
So right now, Manu is gonna ask some questions.
Okay, hi again. Can Claire and Lana talk about a little about Tractor Beam and how we cover soil punk? Please tell us about it.
Absolutely. Lon, we can tag team this one, but so Tractor Beam, as kind of as a thesis, is a quarterly science fiction publication dedicated to what we call soil punk. Soil punk is kind of what we use to encapsulate the genre of speculative fiction, science fiction, basically future visioning storytelling that is fiction based on Earth that in some way or another has its fingers or roots in agriculture, soil science, stuff like that. We try to explore that relatively expansively. So sometimes I think we think about that from the perspective of like, okay, yes, are we talking about farming? Are we talking about gardening? Yes. Sometimes we're really thinking about, what does it really just look like to be on a planet here in the future, and kind of like imagine a tomorrow that actually involves staying here versus going to Mars, with the premise that if we want a better future on this planet, we need a vision, and we need maybe many visions about what that could look like. So that's kind of the foundational soil, so to speak, of what Tractor Beam is. We publish, as mentioned, sort of like what we potentially call science fiction, although I think we take a pretty broad approach to that as well. As Lana was mentioning before, we try to push outside of some of the like hard sci-fi genre. We're looking for work that is more literary fiction. We're really open to broad ranges of tonality in storytelling, with the goal of telling human stories that make people relate to what a future here could look like. Lon, I'm sure you have a lot more to build on that.
Excuse me. Yeah. No, I mean, I think like, yeah, the premise of Tractor Beam, the whole sort of like thesis of Tractor Beam, as Claire said, is what does a future on Earth look like if we sort of built it from the ground up, from the earth up, literally. And how do we use sort of both ancient wisdom and sort of understanding of the land on which, we live, as well as technology and kind of innovation, how do sort of both sides of that coin inform our thinking about what the future could look like. So, and I saw actually on the comments someone was asking, some of the stories address climate change, and just talking a little bit more about this. And I think obviously when our publication is about future on this planet, you can't not talk about climate change. So I would say climate change is perhaps like is certainly a backdrop, if not the sort of like core topic of most of the stories that we share. And again, like the angles that people take to sort of address it are really wildly different, and some are much more explicit and some are much more sort of like muted. But yeah, I mean, you can't talk about this planet without talking about climate change. And I think, to step back even more, so much of our reasoning behind doing this project to begin with is, you know, fiction has throughout time shaped the world that we live in, right? The visionaries, the dreamers, the writers who are imagining these alternative ways of being and living, a lot of times are the people who are inspiring the people who are building technology and the inventors. And so, you can look at it throughout history, all of the inventions that were inspired by fiction, from the cell phone, to all manner of things. But so I think for us, there is, with climate change specifically, there's no shortage of apocalyptic storytelling. Because it's really scary and bleak. And I think, maybe easier to kind of imagine the worst case scenario. And so for us, the challenge is, how do you imagine what a better future could look like? How do we address this problem, in using the earth beneath our feet? So that's kind of like the broad inspiration. And and soil punk is kind of what we have coined as or called the genre behind it.
Yeah, and I guess sort of to underscore everything Lana said, like the the genre of cyberpunk took that premise with computing, right, in the late or early 80s, and said, oh, there's this new technology coming out, it's computers, what world is going to come out of that? And there came, out of that came cyberpunk. Steampunk kind of was a riff on that, with steam energy a little bit different. Solar punk, thinks about that in terms of solar. And to Lana's point, science fiction looks like it predicts the future when you look back, but the history really is almost like goes in reverse, where it's like the visions and the fantasies that people think of are very literally the things that technologists and entrepreneurs are inspired by. And so the stories that people tell are the things that people use as the blueprints for tomorrow. So if we can write inspiring, optimistic premises for tomorrow, maybe they can actually come true, is our big vision. And then hopefully there's some, exciting, damn good stories along the way.
So about what you said, our professor Elton, who is moderating the live session, coordinates a project that translates magazines from English to Portuguese. And this year we are working with Tractor Beam. So translation in a way is like transplanting words and letting them take a root in a new linguistic soil. So Claire and Lana, do you think cyberpunk, so connected to place, land, and community, changed when crossed the border between language?
I love that question. That's really beautifully put. Wow. I mean, my instinctive answer is both yes and no. Like, I feel like place intrinsically matters and language intrinsically matters. But my hope also is that, like, our planet is also a place and a universal one. So hopefully the stories that we're telling through the lens of translation become more soil punk and more relevant to more people. But Lana, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to add. Like it's a yes and a no for sure. I think the context in which you read a story shapes how you think about the story, how the ideas land, what feels most relevant to you. And so, language and place obviously both really, really matter when it comes to kind of like your personal experience of a story. So I think, but I do think, as Claire said, it's sort of like a broadening. It's not a narrowing. I don't think anything gets lost. I think only things are gained.
Totally. And I mean, one of the things we talk about when we are looking at our editorial slate is, a range of topics, a range of scopes, a range of technologies, a range of places of origin, not to, hit a diversity checkbox, but genuinely because part of our curiosity is around, like, what does a global, not climate solution, but like a global, like, soil punk narrative look like? And how does the difference in the places where these ideas are grown, how does that actually change people's perspectives? And we are currently editing for winter. And one of the things we've been talking about as we've been looking at the different, like, interpretations of what our winter theme is, and I won't fully reveal it because you should read Tractor Beam issue 4, but is that it's interesting because some stories and some regions are, maybe thought of in people's mind's eye as more winter than others. And yesterday we were like, well, winter happens everywhere. Winter might look different and mean different things in different places, but that doesn't mean there isn't seasonality everywhere. And I think that's like, especially for a publication that is so rooted in both place and time, pretty relevant and interesting. And I think language is definitely a key part of that as well. That's a great question.
So Maria Clara is going to ask a question right now.
Hi, it's Maria here, and I have a question for Claire and Lana. How can the journals serve as a resource for teaching and research, for example, in future studies, technology, ecology, something like this?
Yeah, so I mean, we hope that these stories are inspiration for future research and thinking and innovation. One of the things that we do with Tractor Beam specifically, in order to kind of bridge that gap for people between the world that we live in today and the fictions in the stories, is what we call the annotation layer. So what that is we invite experts across subject matters, architects, designers, farmers, scientists, and what have you, to comment on the stories and kind of bring sort of to the forefront things that they think are interesting, or to help contextualize ideas that might sound crazy or really far out, but are actually rooted in science that's happening now, or in historical practices that have happened in the past. And so for us, it's really, really important to continue to make that thread clear, in order to help encourage folks to, take up these ideas and run with them. And not everything is about necessarily science. It can be more just sort of like a cultural reference, or sort of understanding, like historically how something was done, and what the author might be referencing, or but I think we think it's really, really important to connect fiction to reality, and help people feel more empowered to do something now, than to think, oh, that's like something that will happen way in the future, someone else's problem. We really think, it's actually everyone's problem now. And so, what can we do to encourage people to think that way and think more urgently? And I think, so that's sort of our attempt to encourage that kind of thinking.
So going back to the last question, Jana, I know you do some translations too. So do you think the translation changes when you cross this border between languages?
Yeah. Translation is a very dear subject to me. That's like something I do for a living, but also something that I love doing because I think it's very beautiful. Actually, the question is really, really beautiful. I also loved it, like how you put it. And my answer is going to be the same as Claire's and Lana's. I think yes and no. When Claire was saying like about how different people see the winter as an example, I'm going to very briefly talk about an experience that we had in Fantástico Guia when we wanted to write for a submission last year, themed like a Christmas holidays, like end of year holidays themed issue. And they were like, oh, we want stories about snow and about like being cozy in your home, etc. And I was like, that I spend my Christmas at the beach, right? Like our family meet at a beach, and it's like there's a lot of barbecues, etc. And Christmas is really like hot here in Brazil. And we were like thinking about it. So yes, I think like when you translate story, you like give it like a new perspective. because the way you think is very related to the language that we were raised in. So it's impossible to, for me at least, to translate a story and keep it like I do. Let's talk about a little bit about the how a translator is a trader, right? But for me, the fidelity of translation is in the reader. I need to, I want to be faithful to the reader. You know, I want I want them to have an experience like similar experience the readers of the original story had. So you know, you try to emulate that, but also I want readers to have an experience that makes sense to them, and it's possible to do that if you like keep exactly the same, you know, like references and the same way of writing, the same like prose, you know. So I think yes and no. I think when you translate a story, you give it like a new clothes, you know, but the story is the same, and you make it accessible to more people. So that's for me is the beauty of translation. You know, every time I talk about it, like in I don't know, when I teach translation, etc., I always say that I really get emotional when I think like how a different person I would be if the stories I read when I was a child, as an example, weren't accessible to me. You know, I had a lot of like references here from Brazil. My main reference for you to know is Castelo Rá-Tim-Bum, is the love of my life. I have like a Mao tattooed here because I really love it, and it made me a fantasy writer. But at the same time, I had so many references that were translated. And at the time, I get emotional when I think that like I never knew the name of the people who translated my childhood stories. And so it's like it's about make stories accessible to you. So I think it's a matter of accessibility. So yes, please do translate more stories, and it's amazing what you're doing with Tractor Being and the project as a whole. So yeah, that's very nice.
So good. Hi, my name is Maria. My question goes to Jana. So in 2017, you founded Mafagaf magazine. I want to know how did the idea come about and what motivated you to invest in a space dedicated to this fantastic literature?
Yeah, it basically came from like seeing that like if people in Brazil wanted to publish short fiction, they didn't have the space for that. They had like little space at Trasgo. That's, as I told you, were like the magazine that was already there when I started thinking about Mafagafo. And then I was like, yes, why not? I didn't mention when I answered the similar question in the beginning, but I also had like one motivation that was I wanted to know more about the market. I wanted to know more how things were done, you know, because we at the time when I was starting writing and I had like, I don't know if you know, but I had like, I'm an engineer. I'm a food engineer. My background is like really not related to literature. I changed like career when I started translating. So it was like I choose to left industry and started translating. But when I started like getting more know more about the market, I was like, okay, I want to know how things were done. And I was like, okay, let's do that, like doing. Okay. So I started Mafagafo. And I think it was the best thing I did because today I have many, you know, contacts and friends that just, you know, like I just got into in contact with those people because I was doing my magazine. So I started to be invited to events to talk about the magazine. I started to know other authors and other editors, other professionals. I started to talk about translators which like made me think about studying translation, etc. So yeah, there was also this motivation related to what's the other form to get involved with the market without being just an author. I was an author. I was writing and publishing in the few places that we had to publish in Brazil, but I wanted also to have this other reach, you know.
Okay, and the magazines, the Mafagaf magazines, have a really beautiful artwork, and I'd like to know who created those pictures, pieces, and what the process is like. And I love the creative and artistic fields, and I absolutely love the illustrations too.
Yeah, they are amazing. I mean, we had like very different processes. The first 2 issues, we had the same artist making all the covers. So the first one was Bruno Miller, the first issue. He was a friend of mine. And as I said, the first issue was not like open to submissions. So we invited everybody who worked in the first issue were invited and worked for free, because at the time we didn't even know it would be a thing to pay the people involved in the process. So he did like all the covers in the first issue were done with like pastels, sticks. I don't know how to say that in English. And he made all these illustrations in a physical form, and then he made it like digital. The second issue was Giovanna. She did like the digital covers, and after that we started the process that you probably are talking about. There are the covers dedicated to each story, and then we had Dante Luiz, which he was our art editor, doing a very nice work of contacting different illustrators, always with taking care of having like very diverse illustrators. So we had like women, non-binary people, we had like indigenous, Black artists doing all different artworks, related or not to the work. So as an example, when we had a story about Belém, that set in Belém, we had like an artist from the north of Brazil doing the cover. So he started to do all this art, like management. And I'm very glad, because he was like really good at this process. And I was involved in all the process, but basically he would like brief the authors, give them the budget that we had for the cover, the timeline that we needed the cover for, and he would like manage all the technical things that I'm not, like very familiar with. So yes, and I love the covers. It's very amazing. So I think Elton sent here the link. There you can see all the covers, so beautiful together.
And a mention to Tractor Beam Aesthetics. I'm really in love with the Instagram, and the page is also hypnotized, like perfect.
Thank you. I mean, Lana, I feel like you can talk about this definitely deeply with me, but I think art and the visual direction for us is really important. Like, we both come from a place of, visual world building, and we know that people love images. Pictures sell the story, and I think having the opportunity to work with amazing artists has both elevated the work and it kind of opens up new pathways into the stories. And then also Tractor Beam, we definitely publish, a lot of short stories and, written fiction, but like short stories and graphic novels are a part of it as well. And Lana, I don't know if you want to talk a bit about the sort of like the graphic novel side of it, but I think that's something that we're really excited about, and we've been kind of pushing into doing more as well now that we've been getting more established.
Yeah, I think, we started, I think our first issue, we didn't have any graphic novels. And we've been slowly kind of increasing the number as we continue, as we learn more. And it also just is something that takes longer to do, to write, to write and draw a graphic novel. So sometimes, authors need a little bit more time. So we're just learning kind of how the process goes. But yeah, I mean, art and design is really important to us. Like that's kind of more my background. And especially because this is a digital publication, we have the benefit of, spaces like Instagram, and like it's a very visual medium. And so, we need to show up in a way that's going to be engaging and exciting. And also, I think the science fiction world, like no shade whatsoever, but there's a specific kind of look and feel that is um kind of like expected. And I think we were really interested in kind of turning that on its head and thinking, okay, like if we want to do a contemporary speculative fiction publication, like what would that look like? How can we avoid any sort of tropes or kind of like just we wanted to look like our own thing. We wanted to be distinct. And so we worked with designers at a place called OOO at the beginning to kind of like establish the overall look and feel. And then, with each issue, we have a new cover artist as well as artists for each of the stories. So we're working with each issue probably between 11, 10 artists and or more. And we've been exposed to incredible folks. And I will also shout out, we work with Elizabeth Goodspeed, who's the editor at large at It's Nice That, which is an amazing online space for design and art. And she helps us find artists essentially. She helps kind of do that matchmaking process of like, oh, okay, like this is your vibe, these are the stories, like here are some artists, and then we will look through and kind of decide who makes sense for the work. And then specifically on graphic novels, it's something that we're learning a lot about. Again, like I don't have specific experience doing that, but it's been really, really fun. So we get pitches from, our open submissions, but we also have lately been really excited by the opportunity to take submissions that are written, just stories, and say, like we really like the story, or we really like the proposal, like this might be better as a graphic novel. And then to sort of a matchmaking process there of figuring out, okay, like would there be an artist that would do like a really great job bringing this particular world to life, and then putting those two folks together, and sometimes we get involved in kind of helping shape the script, if it's like taking a piece of writing and turning it into a script for a graphic novel. Sometimes the author will do it, sometimes it'll be a collaborative process. So we're kind of learning all the different ways that we might approach that kind of collaboration. But yeah, all to say that the visual worlds that we're building are in some ways just as important as the written worlds, because of the way that we're publishing, like because we are an online publication.
Yeah. And I guess sort of just to build on what Lana's saying, so like one of the stories we had last year, wow, time flies, last issue in Something's Rotting, it's called The Fruiting. It's by Anna Kahn. And there had been an artist that we'd been really excited about working with named Rui. And when Anna submitted her story, we were like, this is an amazing story. It is so visual. And we knew that when we kind of read it, we were like, okay, if this just gets 3 images, it'll be awesome. But if it was able to really come to life in, maybe a full spread, it would be even stronger. And we reached out to Anna and we said, hey, like, we love this piece. This is a great story. Would you be open to collaborating with an artist? And she was totally game. And basically we were able to put her and Reed together, and they created the piece that kind of led off the issue, which is The Fruiting. And if you take a look at it, it's like super bold, super graphic, really fun. It's a story of essentially a person who kind of plants mushrooms that then basically like re-terraform the world. And it's really like vibrant and graphic, and honestly, I think a really great piece that we probably would never have come to had we not had the opportunity to put these two people together. And I think one of the amazing things, at least for me, and I think also for Lana, but probably anyone who has the opportunity to make your own publication, is that despite all the stuff we're talking about like, okay, here's the slush and here's how you do this, here's how you do that, is you can kind of do it how you want to do it. And I think, you know, I come from contemporary art. Lana has a phenomenal design background. We both came to this, we're like, what if we can do it differently? Like, what if we can pull in all of these things that we love and bring them into a space that maybe doesn't usually get put together? And if you're doing it your way, no one can tell you that you can't do it. So that's been a really amazing opportunity.
So now we're moving to the last question. I want to know do you guys think that the digital format has transformed the way the public reads and interacts with magazines?
First off, like Tractor Bean is really gorgeous. I just want to say that because it's really beautiful. I'm like so impressed like with everything. I love it. That's one of the reasons that like it called my attention when I started seeing like the submission. So it's so nice. And okay, so yes and no again, because I think like when I started like reading short fiction, I don't know, like in the Anglophone world, it was 2015 or 2014, you know, it was already very established in the digital format. Here in Brazil, I think we never had like short fiction in print. I mean, of course, there's a lot of collections and even magazines in print, but I'm saying that there wasn't like a really established market of short fiction in print. In the United States, it's a little bit different. They had like fantasy and science fiction published in print and available everywhere in markets, in newspaper stands, etc. But here in Brazil, I think it was always already like linked towards digital. And so I wouldn't say it like changed. I think there's very two different publics for the different formats. So I can, if I stop here and think in the average reader of a short fiction in print in the United States, I'm talking about white male science fiction readers, very focused on Isaac Asimov's ish stories, etc. And so this is the public. And there is like those people reading digital short stories. That's like, for me, already a different public. So I wouldn't say it's changed like the way people read short fiction and magazines itself. I think it like reached new publics. I would say that maybe it's like easier for people who like different stories to find what they like, because I don't know if you have an idea that the Anglophone market have like very specific magazines. So there are magazines only for furries, as an example. If you like furry stories with furries, you have your own magazine. Come here. Oh. So she's very, very angry at the other dogs. So I think like you can, if you can find anything that you want to read in digital format. So also it's like more accessible. So here I'm here in Brazil reading short fiction from the Anglophone world, you know, and the other way around. But yeah, that's it. So if you wanted to just be part of the conversation.
The real furries. Yeah, I mean, I think for us, like a big part, to go back actually to the art conversation, and part of the reason that we strategically made some of the choices about making Tractor Beam look the way that it does is because we wanted to reach new audiences. Going actually way back, if our initial goal was how do we get a new group of people to think about the future, to think about agriculture in an optimistic way, to look at soil science as a space of opportunity, and is fiction a place to go there and like get people excited? That was kind of an audience focused perspective, which then brought us into, okay, storytelling is a way to go there. And then, as Jana mentioned, we know that a lot of people, when they first think sci-fi, think a certain type of person, a certain type of science fiction writer, a certain type of science fiction story. The number of times that we've pulled something out of our pile because it involves going to space is a lot. And so when we started thinking about, okay, what does it mean to build a world around tractor beam and to tell these stories, we were like, part of the visual world we've built, part of the type of artists we work with, is to create new ways to get people interested. So some of our readers come to us because they're specifically interested in the material, like off the cuff, because they're like, I'm a sci-fi fan. Some people come to us because they really like a contemporary artist that we work with, and then they see the work that they did, and then they get interested and kind of come from there. So I think we think about audience really expansively because we think about the mission of tractor beam relatively expansively. And then in terms of publishing, actually kind of tapping on the question around women editors, I think we've been really, really, really welcomed into the space in a lot of ways, both as people who are new to editing and kind of new to this side of a relatively small industry. That's been wonderful. I think, as women, I think we've been very welcomed, but I think we are also very conscious of the people that we publish, and we want to make sure that we are also bringing forward voices into science and speculative fiction that are diverse, and that involves like consciously publishing women's stories as well. Lon,
Yeah, I will say we are, so obviously Claire and I, but the team behind Claire and I, our project manager, production, art direction, design, social media, community, all, like our team is all women. And so yeah, like we're really proud of that. I think has been historically a sort of male dominated space, but we are proud to be a woman run publication.
we did talk about maybe trying to hire a non-woman person, which we've yet to do. We're open to it.
Yes, definitely.
Just like talking about this topic, I would say the same. I felt very welcomed. Of course, there's I think that I need to say I'm a white woman in Brazil, at least like seen as a white woman. I was in a position where kind of putting me in a place where it wasn't like dominated already by men, because there wasn't this space like regarding the magazines itself. I feel like the same about like being conscious about who we published, who we used as artists. As I said, I didn't mention, but Mafagafo had like a side project which turned out like really big, which was Faísca. That was a newsletter, weekly newsletter with 2 flash fiction every week. So we published like 100 stories every year, and we had like we were like really interested in like publishing all the states in Brazil. So I think we got it. Like we published all the states. We also had like tried to publish like Brazilian native people, every type of like person. And also I think like it's fun to see that like I see myself today as a respected woman inside science fiction environment, but not only the magazines ones, but I say that like now that I did like Clarion West, that I'm published in several big magazines in the Anglophone world, that I have a BS, a British Science Fiction Association Award. So yeah, so now I'm like well respected, but I can't say like I had like I don't feel I have like extra obstacles in this field, because it was already like a really full of obstacles. So yeah, that's it. I don't know if it was clear. We just started first.
We were talking here, and we want to know from Lana and Claire if you guys know some author that works with like soul punk or with nature.
Brazilian.
Brazilian author. We want to know if you guys know a Brazilian author.
Yeah, so I mean, the first story that we ever published was by Renan Bernardo, who is, yeah, like absolute best. So he was actually, he's been with Tractor Beam as long as anybody, and so an amazing author, amazing person, and so yeah, highly recommend his work, and we're really excited to work with him again someday. Renan, if you see this.
A fun fact that Renan Bernardo is a personal friend of mine. We used to meet all the time. He is also from Rio de Janeiro. He assembled my computer because he's a IT guy. So he assembled my computer. I told him I paid a Nebula nominee in sushi to assemble my computer. So he went home, he assembled my computer, and we paid him with sushi. So that's it. So Renan, I just want to say, Renan is amazing writer, is amazing person, and he's a very, very good resource for everybody who wants to get into the Anglophone world. He welcomes everybody. He talks about it all the time. So yeah, Renan.
So, last, we would like to thank you for sharing your time and insights with us during this interview. It was very important to all of us. And also, thank you for your kindness and contribution to our project. It has been an honor to learn from each of you. So, thank you very much. We are so glad to have you guys here.
Thank you so much for having us. This was really wonderful. And your questions were all really very thoughtful. So really, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Claire and Lana, it was amazing to meet you. I love this expression in English. I love to meet you. And yes, and congratulations for Tractor Beam. It's amazing. It's so beautiful. And so the topics, etc. I love everything about it.
No, you too. Let's definitely be in touch. I think
sure.
We would love to talk to you about work.
Sure. And thank you, folks who were here also making the comments here in the chat and everybody here. So thank you very much.
And please don't hesitate to reach out if you guys have any